Hey guys, today I will be going over some of the free response questions that I want us to focus on. So in this video, I'm going to do question 1 from the Unit 6 free response questions. So in Unit 6, what I assigned were 2 questions. So in this video, I'll go over question 1 and then I'll do a separate video for question 2 and then we'll move on to the other unit that I assigned. Okay, so pay attention because the modified AP exam is just going to have free response questions, no multiple choice. And we've been focusing a lot throughout the year. We focused a lot on multiple choice because that was the bulk of the exam, and now we kind of have to do a switch. But I do recommend you review multiple choice, specifically for the units 1 through 6, because that's what's going to be tested on the exam. Okay, so let's get started. Question 1 was actually pretty straightforward. So let me read it so we get an idea in case you didn't really fully read it. So it says, an array of string objects, words, has been properly declared and initialized. Each element of words contains a string consisting of lowercase letters. Write a code segment that uses an enhanced for loop to print all elements of words that end with ing. As an example, if words contains 10, fading, post, card, thunder, hinge, trailing, batting, then the following output should be produced by the code segment: fading, trailing, and battling. Okay, so as you can see, it's not too complicated, right? So we have an array called words, and it has a bunch of words, a bunch of strings. And what they want us to do is write a for loop. Specifically, they're calling it an enhanced for loop that prints out all the words that end in ing. So that's why the 3 words that printed out were fading, trailing, and battling. Sorry, batting. Okay? So before we get started, I just want to talk about what an enhanced for loop is, because I don't think we use the word enhanced this year. I think we used the for each loop, which basically they're the same thing. So an enhanced for loop, I'm just going to show you really quick what that means. Okay, so here's a regular for loop first. Here, so take a look at this loop right here. This is just a random example, right? So here's the for loop. So remember, a regular for loop has 3 conditions basically. The first condition is where you want your I to start, so int I equals 0. The second condition is basically the condition, so I is going to go up to a certain part or spot, right? So I is less than vowels.length in this case, and vowels is just an array of characters here. And then, usually we put I++ in the third spot, or I minus minus. It's, how you're incrementing or decrementing your variable. Okay, so that's a regular for loop. Let me show you now an enhanced for loop, or it's we learned it as a for each loop, so I think those 2 terms are interchangeable. So here's a for each loop or an enhanced for loop, right? So we have an array of characters, okay, A, E, I, O, U. And what we want to do, let's say we want to iterate over this array and just print out each vowel, right? So an enhanced for loop or a for each loop is just a shortcut, so we don't have to write all of this, right? So what we do is we use the colon syntax. And so what we do is we have just 2 things that we need to include, okay? So since the things that we're iterating over are characters, we need char here, right? Or char. And just a random variable, they're calling it item because these things are items. You could have called it letter. So for each character that's a letter, right? We're gonna iterate through every single item, let's say, and then the second piece is just your array. So here we're going through the vowels array, and we're basically printing out each item in our vowels array. So that's a shortcut, okay? So again, this is char because the array that we're trying to print out, the elements in our array, are characters. And so The second piece is the name of your array, and this is just a variable. You could have used I, you could have used anything, you could have used letter. They used item. They're calling each letter or character an item. You could have called it character, but basically it's a shortcut that iterates through all the elements in your array. So, knowing this and going back to our problem here, we have an array called words that contains a bunch of strings. We need to iterate through this array and check if each element in our array ends in ing, and if it does, we have to print it out to the screen. So let me show you the solution and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so here's my solution now. I actually included a main. Now you don't have to do that when you're submitting your code. They just want you to write the piece of the for loop, basically. So they don't want a main, they don't want you to run it, they don't want you to test it. They just want you to write the for loop, basically. But the reason I made it into a main is because I wanted to test it out. And I even initialized my array of strings just to show you what this looks like. So here's my array. So string words, it's an array, so I have my brackets. And I have all the words that they included. I use the same words, okay? And here is actually what I want you to focus on in this video. This piece right here. Okay, so let's talk about this piece. So I need an enhanced for loop, or we could call it a for each loop. Okay, again, they're interchangeable. Okay, I guess College Board calls it an enhanced for loop. So for, now all the words in here are strings, so I have string, and I'm calling each of these things an element. So I just used a variable element. So for each element, and then colon, and then the name of my array. In this case, in this problem, they called the array words, right? So that's why it's for string element colon words. Now, you could have used any variable here. You could have said, well, I wouldn't use words because words is already a variable, but you could have said like for string item, right? But again, I used element, so I'm just gonna keep that. Okay, so for each element in words, that's what that means. It means for each element in the array words. That's basically what it means. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that element. So for example, let's start with 10. Okay, so it's gonna take the word 10, and then we're gonna use our substring method. Okay, so we're taking our substring method because what the substring method does is it takes a part of the word. Now, if we only care about the last 3 letters of any word, then we're gonna take the length of our word. So maybe let's test this out with maybe like fading, right? Because it's longer than 3 characters. So fading is how long? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the length of fading is 6, right? So I want to check the last 3 letters, right? So I'm gonna take element.length, and length is a method, so you need the parentheses, and I'm gonna subtract 3. Okay, so let's do that. So if fading is 6, it's gonna take the 6, it's gonna subtract 3. So now I'm at 3. So now I'm taking element.substring 3. Okay, so you have to remember what the substring method does. Okay, so what the substring method does when you pass on one parameter into the substring method, what it does is starting at that index, right? So it's gonna start at index 3 inclusive. It's gonna get anything starting at that index and after to the end of the word. So here 3, so index 3 would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's gonna start at I, which is perfect. That's where you would want it to start at. And so substring 3 in this case would get us ing. That's what we want. We want the end of the word, the last 3 letters. So we're checking if that dot equals ing, right? We want to know if the last three letters are ing, and if they are, then I'm printing out that element, which is the whole word, fading. Make sense? Okay, so 3 things I want you to review in case this was confusing to you. I want you to review an enhanced for loop and the syntax for that. I also want you to review some of the methods associated with manipulating one-dimensional arrays. So in this case, we used substring. So you had to know how to use substring in order to do this problem. And so what I recommend, if you found this to be kind of hard, is I recommend you go over unit unit 6, right? This is unit 6. I titled it wrong. It says unit 2, but this is actually unit 6. Okay? And so I would go over unit 6 fully, which is on College Board. Now that doesn't go along with our unit 6 because we did a different order, but you should find the PowerPoint on Google Classroom for one-dimensional arrays. Okay, I'm not sure off the top of my head what unit that is in our order, but it's on one-dimensional arrays. So I would review that and then take a look at the for loop. Okay? All right, so that's it for this problem. Like I said, I'll do a separate video for question number 2.